A history now, the behind the scenes of Ambient to the Plateaux of Mirror. Brilliant album release from Harold Budd and Brian Eno. Harold Budd and Brian Eno had previously worked together on The Pavilion of Dreams, 1978, after British composer Gavin Bryars introduced the pair. After returning from a 4-month trip to Thailand, Eno began working with Budd on Ambient too. The album was recorded in Hamilton, Ontario. Eno explained production as mostly Budd improvising in a sound world Eno had created. The music was improvised by Budd while Eno managed the sound. He would set up the piano to be treated with electronic equipment, and then Budd would improvise with it. Budd was able to listen to the processed sound as he played the acoustic pianos in the studio. He discovered, as he played, how to best manipulate the treated piano, finding the best register and speed to play at, and how to make it resonate. Budd described using choral and delay effects in extreme unintended ways. You're hearing the effect as the sound itself, rather than using them to industry standards. The project was the first time Budd had experienced the concept of using the studio as a compositional tool. According to Budd, production came so quickly and so easily that it was kind of a phantom. You thought you could do 30 more of those if the same joie de vivre. However, after completing their later collaboration, The Pearl 1984, Budd came to think of The Pearl as more focused, and Ambient 2 as a naive album. I might prefer the experience of Ambient 2, but The Pearl is very brilliant too, to be fair. And let's utilize the rest of this video reading out the biography of Harold Budd. Utilize this as a podcast, if you will. Harold Montgomery Budd, born May 24th, 1936, passed away December 8th, 2020, was an American composer and poet. Born in Los Angeles and raised in the Mojave Desert, he became a respected composer in the minimalist and avant-garde scene of Southern California in the late 1960s, and later became better known for his work of figures such as Brian Eno and Robin Guthrie. Budd developed what he called a soft pedal technique for playing piano with use of slow playing in prominent sustain. Budd was born in Los Angeles, California, and spent his childhood in Victorville, California, on the southwestern edge of the Mojave Desert. Harold was only 13 when his father died, and soon his family fell out of their comfortable middle-class existence. He was sent up to the desert to live with friends and relatives as often as possible, but the reality in Los Angeles was growing up in a tough neighborhood, and as the oldest son, being the man of the house. During this time, black culture had an enormous impact on Harold, especially jazz music and bebop, and he could be found in his teenage years playing drums in bars and jazz clubs in South Central Los Angeles. Drafted into the army, he joined the regimental band where he played drums at Presidio of Monterey, POM. Jazz saxophonist Albert Ayler was drafted at the same time and was also a member of the band. Budd joined him in gigs in around the Monterey area. Budd's experience of the army made him determined to get an education. Budd attended high school at Los Angeles High School but did not graduate. He worked as everything from cowboy to mailman, including a stint at Douglas Aircraft. At the age of 21, he left Douglas and briefly moved to San Francisco. While there, he worked at Gump's. Unable to continue living in San Francisco, Budd returned to Los Angeles and enrolled in an architecture course at Los Angeles City College. He switched to a course in harmony and Renaissance counterpoint, and his musical talent was spotted by a teacher who encouraged him to compose. He began to attend performances by artists like Chet Baker and Pharoah Sanders. From that moment on, he recalls, I had an insatiable appetite. Harmony, counterpoint, Renaissance music, I really heard it for the first time. Budd's career as a composer began in 1962. In the following years, he gained a notable reputation in the local avant-garde community. Budd studied music at California State University, Northridge, under Gerald Strang, a protege of Arnold Schoenberg and Aurelio de la Vega. He graduated from CSUN and then went on to full scholarship to the University of Southern California under the tutelage of Ingolf Dahl, graduated in 1966. Budd's work of this period is primarily minimalist drone music influenced by John Cage and Morton Feldman, as well as the abstract expressionist painter Mark Rothko, with whom he corresponded. After completing his degree in composition in 1969, Budd took up a teaching position at the California Institute for the Arts. In 1970, he released his first piece, The Oak of the Golden Dreams, which he recorded with an early model Buchla modular synthesizer at the Institute. At the encouragement, of Brian Eno and Marion Brown, he left Cal Arts for London. Soon afterwards, Budd gave up composition, disgusted by the academic pyrotechnics of the avant-garde community. In London, he found his composing community of Eno, Gavin Bryars, Michael Nyman, and the members of the Cocteau Twins. In 2004, Budd and his wife moved to Monument House in Joshua Tree. The road from my first coloured graph piece in 1962, this is Harold Budd speaking, to my renunciation of composing in 1970, to my resurfacing as a composer in 1972, was a process of trying out an idea, and when it was obviously successful, abandoning it. The early graph piece was followed by the Rothko orchestra work, the pieces for Source magazine, the Feldman-derived chamber works, the pieces typed out or written in longhand, the out-and-out conceptual works among other things, and the model drone works, which include the sax and organ Coeur d'Or and the Oak of the Golden Dreams, the latter based on the Balinese Slendro scale, which scale I used again 18 years later on The Real Dream of Sales, says Howard Budd, of course. In 1972, while still retaining his teaching career at the California Institute for the Arts, he resurfaced as a composer. Spanning from 1972 to 1975, he created 4 individual works under the collective title The Pavilion of Dreams. The style of these works is an unusual blend of popular jazz and the avant-garde. His 1972 work, Madrigals of the Rose Angel, was sent to English composer Gavin Bryars, who passed it on to Brian Eno. Eno contacted Budd and brought him to London to record for his Obscure Records label. I owe Eno everything, okay? That's the end of that. I was plucked from the tree and suddenly I had flowered. I was just waiting. I couldn't do it on my own. I didn't know anything, says Harold Budd. Budd resigned from the Institute in 1976 and began recording his new compositions, produced by Eno. 2 years later, Harold Budd's debut album, The Pavilion of Dreams, 1978, was released. The first performance of the piece was at a Franciscan church in California conducted by Daniel Lentz. The work of Eno led Budd to shift his focus to studio-led projects characterized by use of synthesizers and electronic treatments, often collaborating with other musicians. Budd developed a style of piano playing he deemed soft pedal, which can be described as slow and sustained. While he is often placed in the ambient category, he emphatically declared that he was not an ambient artist and thought that he got kidnapped into the category. His 2 collaborations with Eno, 1980's The Plateaux of Mirror and 1984's The Pearl, established his trademark atmospheric piano style. On Lovely Thunder, he introduced subtle electronic textures. His thematic 2000 release The Room saw a return to a more minimalist approach. In 2003, Daniel Lanois, I never know how to pronounce that, a producer for U2 and Bob Dylan, an occasional collaborator of Brian Eno, recorded an impromptu performance of Budd playing the piano in his Los Angeles living room, unaware. It was released in 2005 as the album La Bella Vista. He had a long-running collaboration with guitarist Robin Guthrie. They worked together initially when Budd worked with Guthrie's band Cocteau Twins on their 1985 collaboration The Moon and the Melodies. The record was released by 4AD under all the collaborators' names, rather than being a Cocteau Twins / Howard Budd record, with Budd being listed first as it was an alphabetical listing. In November 1986, the record charted on the UK Top 75 album chart, spending a week at number 46. Budd and Guthrie subsequently released several albums together, including 2 soundtracks to the Greg Araki films Mysterious Skin 2004, not bad, and White Bird and a Blizzard 2014, even better. Araki's films are pretty strong actually. I don't think Mysterious Skin is one of my favorites, but the ones around it, really solid stuff. With the last 2020's Another Flower, recorded in 2013 but only released 4 days before Budd's death. Budd also collaborated with Andy Partridge of XTC on the album Through the Hall, John Fox on the album Translucent / Drift Music 2003. That one's pretty good, and to my memory, the Through the Hill is quite good, certainly. And work with Jar Wobble on the Solaris concert and live album in 2002. Gotta get a hold of that. I mean, listening to that, Jar Wobble was an absolute genius as well, obviously. He composed music for the score of the 2020 miniseries I Know This Much Is True. Brian Eno called Budd a great abstract painter trapped in the body of a musician. The Guardian said, the core Budd sound of yearning piano motifs and reverb-laden impressionism is often called minimalism, but compared with the cyclical craft of Steve Reich and early Philip Glass, his low-key expansive forays felt deftly maximalist. This has made Budd's craft synonymous with the dream world. An heir to Satie and Debussy, his music was treated and poetic, never knee-jerk nor incautious. If you're so inclined, do give this another listen. Ambient to The Plateaux of Mirror by Harold Budd and Brian Eno. Thanks again, my friends. Appreciate it.